Hi! It's time for another Too Many Cards video with Emily, Leapart, and me. And this time we are working with some tailored expression stamps and dies. My first time ever playing with them. I'm so excited! We use the Sarcasri-Chick and Chicklets stamps and dies, and it was a blast. I started by stamping a bunch of images from both sets. I, of course, had to stamp the big chick, and then I basically stamped every tiny little chicklet a million times on some scrap watercolor paper that I have. Okay, full disclosure, it's not watercolor paper. It's Bristol Smooth Surface Vellum. It's Bristol Vellum Smooth Surface paper, mixed media. It's a lot. It's a mouthful. But that's what I like to use with my Zig Clean Color brush markers. Okay, so they were all stamped, and then I spritzed some water on my craft mat, dampened my water brush, which is PS dry inside, and then I just started coloring. I used mustard color to add some shading to my chicks, and then a couple different yellows to blend it out, and then I used my water brush, which is damp from the droplets I spritzed, to pull out the color. And then once I got the color pulled out, I would wipe off my brush onto some paper towel and then let it dry. And then if I needed to, I would go back and add another layer of color to add the shading. I also added some pink cheeks, of course, to Little Chick, and it just makes her look even more excited. And just wait till you see what sentiment I picked. It's literally hysterical. All of the phrases on both of these sets are so funny, and I had the hardest time picking which one I was going to use because they all cracked me up. And I was like, yes, perfect for my sarcastic friends. I colored my speech bubble like I color most of my speech bubbles, which is darker shading on the bottom and then using my water brush to pull up the color. And I really like that, especially, can you see in that speech bubble it says mom about 1,500 times? That's how I feel sometimes. Is anybody with me? Raise your hands. That's how I feel sometimes. When I colored the little chicklets, they look similar, which is good because they're all little chicks. But I actually used a different color combination for each little set of chicklets. I used light browns, very light browns, like a beige and mustard, and then light yellows, various colors for each one. And then this last set, I used even a little bit of orange. But the orange is such a cute color because when you add water to it, it becomes even a little bit yellower. So they're all different, as you can see, but really, I use different colors for each one, but it's subtle, so they all look similar. Does that make sense? They're all different, which is good because I used all different markers, but they all look similar, which is also good. I don't know. Okay, so then I added pink cheeks to all of them, of course, and then oranges for their little beaks and feet, and then I'm done. That's my coloring. Woo-woo! Time to die cut them out. Okay, now it's time to create one of my backgrounds. I am using a sentiment on this card that uses the word fire. So I'm going to create a little fiery, flamey background with some watercolors. I'm using a piece of plastic packaging. It is literally from my package of foam tape I use for my cards. And I just cut it up into these little workable squares. I add some water in the watercolor that I want to use, put it directly on the clear packaging, press the packaging onto my paper, and that's how I'm creating my background. I'm using some watercolors, some alt new watercolors, which are my favorite, and that watercolor combined with the paper I'm using, which is not watercolor paper, by the way, it's just plain white cardstock, actually works really well. The cardstock doesn't pill, it doesn't tear, it doesn't even warp. but I'm not, I mean, you can see I'm barely using any water. The only water I'm using is to get the color moving on the palette. Then I color it onto my packaging and press it on to my paper. So there's not a lot of water. If you wanted to watercolor a beautiful picture, you would not want to use regular white cardstock. But for this technique, which is barely a technique, it works fine for me. I am just also going in with the color, adding it in a dotting, kind of stippling it with my paintbrush, which adds some texture. Again, not a lot of water. It's very damp. I used a little bit of brown at the bottom to add some shading to the fire. And then splattered some color on top in yellows and oranges and reds, and just to create like a flamey, fiery type background. I really like how this came out. I've only ever done this technique when I create waves, so it was kind of fun to try fire. I don't know. What do you think? Did it work? Is it too weird? Be honest. Let me know. Yeah, so that's the first background. My second background is just a piece of cardstock. I'm super fancy and using my kids' old planes ruler. Pretty sure they got that at like the dollar store or something when they were little, but I use it. I'm not measuring length exactly. I'm just want them to be the same distance apart. So that's what I use in my craft room because I'm super fancy. Super fancy, guys. Okay, and then I'm using masking tape to mask off this little panel, and then using a bunch of distress inks to create a rainbow background. I'm using picked raspberry, squeezed lemonade, twisted citron, tiny bit of mowed lawn just to darken it up a little bit, peacock feathers, and wilted violet. And that creates my rainbowy background just to add some color and pizzazz. I also, oh, here I am with more yellow. I'm like, the yellow didn't show up. I need more yellow. That's what I did. I had to go over each one a couple times. I was like, I'll just add a little bit of ink blending. Not a lot, but then here I am adding in darker, darker, darker over and over. Because I can't help it. I splattered some water on top to add texture. And then also used a little bit of white acrylic paint to add some more texture, I guess. Texture. And so yeah, little fun background. Splat, splat, splat. And this is basically what that card is going to look like when it's dry. Just a bunch of little chicklets going crazy all over the place with that mom speech bubble, which I think pretty much says it all right there. I popped up the speech bubble and those trio of little chickies and the little guy in the air, and everything else is just adhered basically directly onto the card front. I wanted to do the rainbow in the background since the yellowy chickies were so tiny. I thought that the rainbow background would add some pop. And then, of course, that phrase, parenting, we're all just winging it. I mean, truth, right? That's so true. And I thought it would be really fun with these little chickies going crazy, because sometimes I feel like even though I only have 2 boys, sometimes I swear it feels like there's 100 in my house. Like right now. Is there 100? Is there just 2? I don't know, because they're crazy. This last little guy, I couldn't figure out where to put him. I ended up putting him around the phrase, and I kind of like that he's not in the rainbow panel. So that's that. My second card, I do not try this at home. I actually used a lighter to burn the top left corner of my card because the card's on fire, people, clearly. I painted a fire. The sentiment's about fire. We needed fire. It was something I did in my kitchen over the sink. I don't know. Is this weird, guys? Is it too much? I don't know. Please tell me. And that's my first card. All done. And my second card, I decided to put a little bit of paper behind the burned part. I really like the dark grays against the flames. I really think that added so much to my card. And I like how it turned out, but please, I'm ready. Hit me with your best shot. What's your opinions? Be nice. And those are my cards. I really love them. What you can't see here is I did actually add some hair to my big chickie flame card because the sentiment references hair. Hello, why did it not occur to me at the time? I don't know, but I colored and stamped and dyed some hair and added it to my card. And those are my cards. And be sure to comment on my video and Emily's video for a chance to win one of two $25 gift certificates to Tailored Expressions.